Welcome, Garry. It's really great to have you here.
Oh gosh, thank you for having me. It's such an honor. I mean, has been such an honor to spend time with you and to have you on my channel. It's such an honor for you to have me on yours in return.
So as an entrepreneur turned investor who sees so many pitches, and not just any investor, but a seed stage investor, right? Which is its own special brand of hard. What are some of the most common mistakes that you see people make, both in their pitch, but also as they're executing at those seed stages? What are the things that you've told them and you wish you could tell them, and like you look back and wish you could have learned too?
Yeah. So I open up my DMs on Instagram. I think of it as my version of talking to my users. And it does help me get back to what do people need to hear. The number one thing does seem like, people end up picking the wrong idea. And I hesitate to say it because the reality is like, I'm not clairvoyant. And all I know is sort of have that gut feeling of like, is that going to work or not? The misconception I think people have is that they want success and then they look for stories that have happened to follow. And that makes sense because in school and growing up, we are taught to look for examples in history and then mimic those things. And the hardest part about creation is not to find things that worked in the past and do those things again. That doesn't actually tend to work. Sometimes it works because if you look at the marketplace and say, well, this solution for us, we looked at Blogger that was owned by Google at the time, I think, and it was just not changing. It wasn't a thing that worked very well. And, one feature that we didn't like. So my startup was called Posterous. It was dead simple blogs by email. And we said, well, Blogger has this post by email feature, but we could do it better. And so that at least was looking at something that did work and did exist, but then we found something about it that was not quite right. And our hypothesis was that if we do that thing, that one feature 100 times better than everyone else, that was enough to get people to try it. And I was honestly surprised myself when it turned out to be true. And now with hindsight, I understand why. We picked this feature. It was not a good blog platform yet, but it did post by email better than anyone else. And at that moment, the iPhone was new, apps didn't exist yet, Instagram didn't exist yet. So we became sort of the easiest way to get photos and later video off of their iPhone because the Photos app itself supported posting photos and background threading. So it was really easy and it actually was very reliable. And you couldn't really do it any other way. Like the web browser didn't even support like a little photo picker yet. These are very early times for the iPhone. And in retrospect, that's how we built something that became a top 200 website. And the day we stopped growing was the day Instagram came out, actually.
What a story.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's about this moment in tech development time where there's an unmet need. The thing I love about that story is it honestly comes back to stumbling into an unmet need, an unmet market need.
And the hard part is in the moment, you don't even necessarily know. Our vague hypothesis was like, this is something that as bloggers, we would like. And then we figure other people might like it. And so when I meet founders, often I don't really expect anything more than that. But we are looking for like sort of for secret knowledge at that point. What is something that it sounds like what worked in the past, but nobody else has figured out X yet, right? Like post by email was our X and it was a hypothesis and then we proved it right in the marketplace. So often that's sort of what I'm looking for. Some examples include, I think, Instacart is worth, 17 billion right now, at least rumored. And then, I think they're well on their way to a really incredible IPO sometime in the future, unspecified. But I met them when Apoorva was really working on it basically alone. and he had hired 2 people off of Craigslist to be his first drivers. And he had built a driver app and a consumer app. And the secret knowledge at that moment, because that was actually, a lot of people were trying to create that startup at that moment. You know, I probably read at least dozens of other companies in the YC batch that were trying to do it. None of them were accepted because it was just an idea. But here was someone who not only had the idea, but had actually built it and hired people, and you could put your credit card in and order things from the local Safeway in Mountain View, California. And the reason why, the secret knowledge there, I think, was actually from an adjacent space. Uber was brand new, and Uber had just spawned Lyft in a way, because Lyft was Zimride. Zimride was trying to make, Zimride was trying to do long distance shared rides. And then they said, oh, now that Ubers exist, now that you can do Uber with black cars, they were like, let's take our existing citizen drivers and turn them into basically local drivers without the licensing. And then that's what caused Uber to change into UberX. And they had to launch, because otherwise, and if they didn't, they would have been disrupted by Lyft. Lyft would have run away with it. So it's interesting, like, you know, these sorts of idea mazes happen over and over again. And what's crazy about tech is, because that was happening over here, Apoorva looked at grocery delivery, and he had seen Webvan. Webvan had famously sort of burnt, you know, tens if not hundreds of millions of dollars on like all kinds of inventory and drivers and warehouses. And what Apoorva realized is, we can take this asset light approach and apply it to grocery. You know, we don't have to take any inventory. We can use data to figure out whether or not a Safeway even we'll have more data about the inventory of Safeway or any grocer than the grocer themselves. We can hire, you know, people to basically do the driving, and we can build demand. And, you know, it's a pure marketplace, just like Uber or Lyft. And so that's sort of what it took, like this secret hypothesis that, if right, turns out to be, you know, now a $17 billion or more business. I mean, the idea is important. And I honestly, like, that was one of the more disappointing things going from founder to VC. I remember seeing Sequoia talk about this at Y Combinator, and they would talk about the wave that you choose to get on is more important than the surfer themselves and their skills. And as a surfer, engineer and designer and product person myself, I was like, I don't really want that to be true. And
well, you know, there's some caveats there, because you just told us a story about a whole bunch of people with an idea, but one was accepted in Y Combinator because he had built something and was really pushing it. So there are important qualities, not just
they are
the
very
wave.
important. Yeah.
But I think the importance of the wave is what is important, and I call that market pull.
Yeah.
But I think the importance of that wave, the importance of market pull, can overwhelm the best teams if they're not ready, if it's not the right thing. But it can lift up teams that are mediocre, maybe.
That's right.
Was maybe Sequoia's point. But if it's a good market opportunity, better teams will come in.
Yeah. Well, the classic VC view is if you have the right market pull and you have enough of a lead, you can put enough money in and replace the management. So that was definitely the old view of VC. And, you know, for us, I'd rather not have anything like that ever happen. So when we do seed, we definitely try to find complete teams for exactly that reason, because the other way doesn't work. Like, I never want to be in that situation where it's like needing to wrest control. You know, for me, if we have to even think that, we funded the wrong team.
I think the idea that you're funding a team, not an individual, is important there. So as you're looking at teams, as you're listening, as all your senses are picking up everything about them, let's talk about the red flags and the green flags. It's one of the things that's so helpful for people to know with some brutal honesty. Let's get the red flags out of the way. So let's say you're listening to a pitch. Let's say it's a good idea. Bad idea, you're not even listening, right? But the reality is, at seed stage, they could iterate so much into a different idea. Justin TV became Twitch,
Yeah.
Glitch became Slack.
Yeah.
So that can definitely happen. And of course, you know that. So when you're looking at teams, looking at the pitch, and you're into it, what are some of the things that make you sit back and go, red flag, don't know?
I mean, they're pretty simple, honestly, but it is interesting how people are not necessarily aware of it. I mean, simple ones like having co-founders who speak over each other, it's sort of, you can tell, if you sit down with a couple and, if there's any sort of contempt or, you can feel it, you can tell. And, the hard part is it's hard to hide things like that. You can tell a lot about people's relationships just by observing. That's something I underestimated. I didn't think that I would ever end up developing those skills, but it is sort of true that as you develop as an investor, some of the best investors end up sort of becoming therapists, actually. So you're always looking at, even the micro interactions of founders and how they sort of key off each other or openly fight in front of other people. It's surprising, but it is such a tell.
Do you do any probing on how coachable someone is or how in love with their idea they are versus being willing to iterate? Because there's this kind of weird balance of vision and flexibility, like really listening to the market. Is that something that you tune in on? Do you think we can even get a feeling for that, in an interview or two with the team?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't have an answer there because there are people who I've funded who are very, very committed to their idea and they're right. My favorite example of this is actually Rob Reinhart from Soylent, which is, even bringing up the term, the name of the brand, Soylent, like I'm sure people listening to this are like, either they love it because they drink it all the time, or they hate it because it represents, whether it's tech bros or sort of this move against organic food, right? The sheer fact that elicited such an extreme response was actually the reason why it was such a brilliant brand. And so, for me, when I first heard that they were going to call that product Soylent, I said, haven't you ever heard of Soylent Green? Like, you cannot call this that. But they were right. And, they ended up getting free press, like to the tune of probably tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of free press and advertising without lifting a finger. I'm actually working on a video right now about how people could be better investors. And that's sort of one of the first things is seeing so many different teams and ideas can make you feel like you are clairvoyant. But if anything, the longer I do this, the more I know I am not clairvoyant at all. Like I am just the outcome of my own biases and my own experiences. And then what's interesting is that actually frees me to say what I really think. So I think it's a big mistake that investors make to say like, you will fail for X, Y, and Z reason. I try not to say that. Instead, I say, here's what I'm feeling based on my experience. And I'll sort of like try to give some background. And then I'll be like, what I'd be worried about is blah, 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 right? Like whether it's go to market or in my experience, I've met a lot of teams trying to do this and CAC becomes a problem. Like, CAC cannot be higher than lifetime value from what I've seen. How do you think about that? And then I want it to be sort of like improv. And sometimes, they've thought about that and have a bunch of data or even anecdotes that sort of like, and then I like to see how people think about it, right? If they can engage with me, if I can present, something like that and then have them engage and like sort of change my mind, then I know I can work with them. And can we get a volley going, back and forth?
I think we just answered some of the things that are your green flags too, which is getting a volley going back and forth and seeing how someone responds to a tough question. You couched it in very gentle terms, but seeing how someone responds to a question that probes into this kind of sleek pitch that they've given you is always interesting. Do they get defensive? Are they prepared? Do they dig in? Do they try and change the subject?
Yeah.
All those things. You yourself are an entrepreneur and a YouTuber, and you've built your channel impressively. So you speak authentically from those points of view. What is your sweet spot? What is it that really, as a creative person, lights you up the most?
I guess just trying to help. I mean, it sounds cheesy, honestly, but I can see it in the way you put together your content as like a way to teach. I think it's basically that. It's so cool to be able to reach so many people and try to have a positive effect on them. And then I feel lucky in that society has blessed me with a lot of privilege at this point. Like, I don't need my YouTube channel to make a single dime. I donate all of the proceeds to Code 2040, which is an org that fights for racial diversity in tech, actually. I feel conviction about how important that is as a cause. And then how do we just push everything forward and sort of make the society that we'd like to live in? And I think media is an incredibly important part of that. I can also lift up stories like yours and lift up, people who have been doing incredible work. I am excited to be able to have you on the channel and show how awesome, your books and your frameworks are and your programs are for people who are trying to do exactly what all of us want to do. Like, how do we make things for 1 billion people? Even the idea of being able to do that is super powerful. Like, I want people to know that it is within their power. Yeah, the Steve Jobs quote is, when you grow up, you tend to get told the world is the way it is, and your life will just, you should live inside that world. Try not to bash into the walls too much. Try to have a nice family, have fun, save a little money. And that's a very limited life. Life can be much broader. And once you discover that simple fact that everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you, and you can change it, and you can influence it, and you can build your own things that other people can use. And once you learn that, you'll never be the same again.
Amen.
I'm like, that's church testimony. Oh my God.
That's totally church. I love it. That's deciding that you're going to shape the world. So we will link to Garry's YouTube channel, to initialize.com, his VC firm. Any other links that we should include so folks can follow you and get in touch?
Oh yeah, I mean, my Instagrams are open, so if people need help or I can't give super extreme like essays back, but I am I'm trying to do my volley game with people. If I can point people at the right direction, or even just be a check or balance on what people are thinking, like that. That's the coolest, most interesting thing, because it feeds me too. I'm like, oh, this is what people are doing, so that's how that helps me in my goals. Like, how do I help the most number of people with this? Then going direct is very powerful for me. So hit me on Instagram.
So that's wonderful. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again soon, probably on Clubhouse.
Awesome. Thank you so much, as always.
So remember, don't look to the past. Look for an unmet need and fill it. Find a better solution that no one else has figured out. That's your competitive edge. Ride the waves of market trends and social forces. You can't push a wave, but you can surf it. Put together a team that can see your idea through. Investors bet on teams as much as they bet on ideas. Engage with criticism instead of defending against it. That's the best way to work with your investor. If you like Garry's tips, check out more of Garry's wisdom and learn about our programs at gamethinking.io/Garry.